I am so thrilled to have you here today because we're looking at what might literally be the most fascinating and definitely the most delicious historical mystery in the culinary world. Think about the croissant. Every single country on the planet recognizes it. The French plastered on all their tourism posters. It's the absolute star of every Parisian bakery window. It is, without a doubt, the single most recognizable piece of French cuisine on earth. But what if everything we think we know about this buttery, flaky masterpiece is completely wrong? Today, we're going to unravel the dramatic historical mystery behind this world-famous pastry. And most importantly, we're going to see how a single, brilliant culinary technique, lamination, fundamentally changed pastry history forever. Okay, let's dive into this because the truth here is absolutely shocking. The ultimate French pastry? Yeah, it wasn't invented in France. It actually wasn't even created by a French baker. In fact, the country that made it famous had absolutely zero to do with its actual birth. So, to really understand how a simple piece of bread evolved into a global icon, we kind of have to strip away centuries of rumors and get right down to the core of how baking evolved. Section 1, the Great French Pastry Myth. Before we can uncover the true science behind the modern pastry we all know and love, we've got to address those popular legends that people just love to believe about the croissant. So you've probably heard at least one of these famous historical rumors. The first big legend claims that back in 1683, heroic underground bakers in Vienna heard the tunneling of the invading Ottoman Empire. And to celebrate saving the city, they supposedly baked a roll shaped like the crescent moon from the Ottoman flag. Crazy, right? Well, the second legend claims that in 1770, a homesick Marie Antoinette literally smuggled the pastry into France in her luggage when she married King Louis XVI. Now, these are wonderfully romantic stories, but food historians universally debunk these charming fictions. There is absolutely zero historical evidence for either of them. I mean, the Ottoman story didn't even appear in print until 1938. That is over 250 years after the battle. And as for Marie Antoinette, aristocratic records of the French court's breakfasts from that era don't mention this pastry a single time, not once. The actual, incredibly humble truth about the croissant's ancestor is something called the Austrian Kipferl. And far from being some celebratory war prize or a fancy royal delicacy, it was literally just a common Austrian breakfast roll that folks had been eating for centuries. We're talking written records in Austria referencing crescent-shaped breads going as far back as the 13th century. It was just an unremarkable everyday item. A baker in Vienna or Salzburg would turn these out by the dozen every single morning without a second thought. And here is where we really see the stark sensory contrast between history and the modern day. The historical Kipferl was essentially a dense, chewy, heavy roll made with an enriched dough. Think something closer to brioche. It was just a solid, simple bread. But compare that to the modern French croissant. Airy, shattering, with literally paper-thin layers of butter and dough. The flaky, delicate pastry that we automatically associate with the word croissant simply did not exist yet. It's almost like comparing a caterpillar to a butterfly. Section 2, from Austria to Paris. Let's see how this dense Austrian bread finally made its way out of Vienna and into the culinary capital of the world. Because the bridge between the heavy Kipferl and the flaky croissant wasn't some myth, it was a real guy. So in 1838, a man named August Zang opened the Boulangerie Viennoise right in the heart of Paris. And the ultimate irony here, Zang wasn't even a trained baker. No way! He was an Austrian artillery officer who just got tired of the military and decided, hey, I'm gonna become an entrepreneur. So he brings over a crew of Viennese bakers, introduces steam ovens, which gave his bread this really distinctive glossy sheen, and uses incredibly savvy marketing, like newspaper ads and huge window displays. He essentially beat Parisian bakers at their own game by introducing a completely foreign breakfast bread to the most competitive food market in all of Europe. A real game changer. But here is the absolute weirdest twist of fate. Barely 10 years later, in 1848, amidst all the political unrest in France, Zang just abandons Paris. He completely sells his wildly successful bakery, goes back to Austria, and pivots entirely. He founds a major newspaper and becomes a highly wealthy banking and mining magnate. It's like revolutionizing French baking was just a little side hustle for him. When the guy died, his tomb made zero mention of baking whatsoever. He walked away completely, never knowing that the dense little crescent breads he left behind were about to literally change breakfast history forever. Section 3, Lamination Changes Pastry History. We are now reaching the absolutely crucial turning point in our explainer. Because up until the early 20th century, French bakers were still just serving that dense Kipferl. What changed everything was a scientific culinary breakthrough. In 1915, a French baker named Sylvain Claudius Goy published a recipe that fundamentally reinvented the pastry from the inside out. Goy had this absolute genius idea. What if you took the famous Austrian crescent shape, but combined it with a really old French technique that was originally just used for puff pastry? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the exact process of lamination that Goy applied. Here's how it works. You take the yeasted bread dough and roll it completely flat. Then you spread cold butter straight across the center. Fold the dough over it and turn it 90 degrees. You roll it out again, fold it again, and repeat the whole shebang. And the temperature? It has to be absolutely perfect. If the butter gets too warm, it just melts into the dough and you're left with greasy bread. The butter literally must stay perfectly separate from the dough throughout this entire intense folding process. By repeating this process just 3 or 4 times, a properly laminated croissant ends up containing over 80 individual layers. 80! It is an absolute architectural marvel of culinary science. You are essentially creating dozens of alternating sheets of dough and butter that are so incredibly thin you can almost see right through them. So the absolutely crucial point here is exactly how this science works in the hot oven. Lamination is a technique where, as the pastry bakes, the moisture trapped inside those microscopically thin sheets of solid butter instantly turns to steam. And that steam aggressively pushes the layers of dough apart vertically. At the exact same time, the fat from the butter is essentially frying each of those dough layers individually from the inside out. This specific French technological intervention is exactly what creates that golden, shattering exterior and that beautifully airy interior. Lamination didn't just tweak or improve the pastry, it fundamentally reinvented it from the ground up. Section 4. The Industrial Croissant Boom. Moving into the 20th century, by 1920, the French government officially declared the croissant a national product. But the way this painstakingly hand-laminated French pastry actually conquered the globe was through a massive shift: mass production. In 1981, American corporate innovation really stepped onto the scene. The Sara Lee Corporation developed a highly effective method to freeze unbaked, laminated croissant dough so it could be shipped anywhere. Suddenly, this luxurious Parisian treat was completely transformed into fast food. Places like Burger King could serve croissant breakfast sandwiches without needing a highly trained pastry chef on staff. You could literally just pull them right from the freezer, proof them, and bake them on demand. Talk about an idea spreading like wildfire. And hey, if you think that industrialization only happened in America, prepare to be completely shocked by this number. Today, estimates suggest that roughly 85% of croissants sold in French bakeries are actually industrially manufactured. Yes, in France. They are made in massive factories on assembly lines, shipped completely frozen to the local bakery, and then simply baked on site. So when you walk into a little shop in Paris and smell fresh pastry, 4 times out of 5, it was baked there, sure, but it certainly wasn't laminated and shaped there. Crazy, right? Which leads us to a seriously delicious irony in modern French baking conventions. If you buy a perfectly straight croissant in France today, that actually signals it's the premium version made with 100% butter. But if you buy a curved croissant, the traditional crescent shape, it legally signifies that it likely contains cheaper fats like margarine. Let that sink in. The crescent shape that literally gives the croissant its name, because the word translates directly to crescent, is now strictly reserved for the inferior, cheaper version of the pastry. You literally can't make this stuff up. Section 5. A global butter vehicle. Let's move into the final chapter of our story, exploring how this pastry has become a brilliant blank canvas for global food culture, all thanks to the magic of lamination. And this brilliantly illustrates the incredibly rapid timeline of the pastry's naturalization and industrialization. Just look at how incredibly fast this moved. From an Austrian artillery officer opening a shop in 1838, to a French lamination recipe in 1915, to becoming an official, literal symbol of France just 5 years later in 1920, and then straight to a frozen fast food staple by 1981. In the grand scheme of culinary history, this entire transformation happened in the blink of an eye. Independent scholar Jim Chevalier captures this perfectly in this quote: "The croissant began as the Austrian Kipferl, but became French the moment people started making it with puff pastry." When you really think about it, frame this entire historical journey as what it really is: perhaps the single most successful piece of culinary identity theft in human history. The French basically took an Austrian shape, gave it a French name, but most importantly, they applied the uniquely French science of lamination to completely remake it. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought on our final slide, connecting all this complex history directly back to your next breakfast. The next time you sit down at a cafe and take a huge bite of that shattering buttery pastry, ask yourself, what exactly are you tasting? Are you tasting a fiercely protected French tradition, 1,000 years of humble Austrian breakfast history, or the massive global reach of American industrialization? The truth is, all of those historical layers are folded right in. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope you never look at your breakfast the exact same way again.